Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the third and final part of our Steamboy review. Last time we left Ray when he was returning the steamball to Robert Stevenson. Everything should be going smoothly from this point on. You know, keep calm and maintain that stiff upper lip, as they say.
All these inventions, science itself, what's the purpose of it all, do you think?
Science exists entirely to make people happy. Right, Ray?
Here.
I thank you.
Splendid. Prepare the assault. Arm the police as well. Tell them they have full authority to use their weapons. Quickly!
You see, Ray, it is quite true that science exists to make people happy. But people can't benefit from science unless they're secure, and it's the nation that provides security.
Okay, that must be the face of the guy who just handed Cyclone B to the Nazis, thinking it would just be used as bug repellent. Poor Ray, he just can't get a break. His father is a pragmatist, his grandpa a hippie that's off his medicine that is now running around disguised as a homeless person. And now this guy intends to use the steamball for national aims. But this scene is just another example of this production's narrative style. In the previous part of this review we talked about the central conflict of the movie, between Ray's father and grandfather, and how Ray has no real part in it. In this episode we're gonna talk about how Otomo, the director, used the characters in this story, but I decided to save that for the end, so bear with me. Back to London, where the plot thickens. With the steamball in Stevenson's possession, the British decide to send in the Bobbies! They have a lot of experience with football hooligans, you know. So an international arms dealer with its own mercenary forces shouldn't be a problem. Okay, I lied. It goes as well as you would expect. The assault on the castle is met with a demonstration by the Foundation of its new steam-powered weapons, which turns the World Fair of 1866 into a war zone. And the Bobbies aren't doing so hot. But in their defense, hooligans usually don't have power armor or grenade launchers. Stevenson has some inventions of his own, however. He uses the steamball to power his own tanks, which is inspired by the 1905 Hornsby chain tractor. This is the situation Ray's grandfather, Lloyd, warned his grandson about. We create our own enemies. Now I'm not entirely sure about this, but I think provoking a conflict with the English government was the plan from the beginning. That way the O'Hara Foundation could show off the effectiveness of their weapons by defeating the mightiest empire at the time. Now earlier I mocked the fact they used the police force to defeat the O'Hara Foundation. But this might be a reference to the fact that the English didn't have a substantial home army until the Great War, which was a big problem in 1914. Most of the regular forces were in the colonies, and the defense of the country itself relied on the navy. Speaking of which, back in the steam castle, Edward is in a tight spot as the Royal Navy gets involved in the fighting and uses their 12-inch problem solvers on his creation, forcing Edward to take action. So he heads to the bridge and transforms the steam castle into... well, we'll leave it at that for now. Back on the ground, the British faced the biggest defeat on home soil since the Dutch raid on Chatham in 1667. True story. So when Stevenson and his flunky David are literally distracted by the main plot, Ray takes the steamball back, and after an action scene involving a flying machine, Ray uses the steamball to power his own jet system in order to save those trapped inside of the castle. Meanwhile, Edward enters the bridge of the steam castle, in this pretty awesome scene where we learn about his prosthetic arm being the activation key. And then look at these optical systems. It is this attention to detail why people love this film. If only Otomo paid this much attention to character development, eh? Back at the plot, however, things continue to escalate. And before you can scream... The Falcon! The Millennium Falcon! It's the Millennium Falcon! Oh my god! We have an island in the sky. Around this time, a wounded David approaches Ray with a proposal. It's quite extraordinary, actually. Don't get me wrong, David is not an important character with any development, but within 30 seconds this character gets reduced to a one-dimensional villain. Here David reveals himself to be a parasite, an engineer that worked with Stevenson not because of his vision, but because of his fame and social standing. But now, he sees a bigger fish in Ray, and with Stevenson about to be defamed in light of this incident, David proposes to Ray to start a new workshop, this time bearing the Steam name, the family who created the Steam Castle, which is killing people. Right now. I don't know what David is thinking, but I don't think it's a sound business plan to carry the name of a man who just caused an international incident that is about to go down in history. But David counts on the power the Steamball will bring into the world. If Ray could recreate it, every superpower in the world would want to have access to it for obvious reasons. But patents are already a thing in 1866, so... Well, anyway. Ray rejects David's proposal and then wants to leave. David doesn't want to see his golden goose fly, literally and figuratively I suppose, tries to stop him. But Ray knocks him out. Meanwhile, the Navy is still fighting the castle, but they hit a snag. You see, the escaping steam from the castle is freezing all of London. The super compressed steam in the steamball is now, well, super expanding, which requires a super amounts of energy which need to come from somewhere. Now, I am no physicist, so I have no idea this is a sound theory, but it looks cool. Meanwhile, in the Steam Castle, Lloyd managed to escape during the beating the castle had got to endure and makes his way to the bridge to confront his son. So, after all this awesomeness, what do we get? Well, more philosophical banter, of course. Because that's just what we want during our high-octane action scenes. However, Edward refused to repent, and if the Captain Picard speech doesn't help, well, you know your opposition is never going to bend. You see, Edward believes that science is an expression of mankind's ultimate power, and opposing his plans means setting back humanity's progress. Now you might wonder, how does this big middle finger to physics fit within the ideological framework? Well, that's the point. The Steam Castle proves humanity can give the big middle finger to physics. That's literally all this is. Edward just wanted to make a point. This 500-ton monstrosity that is freezing all underneath it is just a statement. Edward, has anyone ever told you just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should? He could have been somebody like Tesla, who brings awe to the audience by demonstrations like the famous Tesla coils. But no, he decides to freeze the city of London. Edison would have told him to pipe things down, and he electrified an elephant in public just to slight his competition. Now, I'm not sure about this, but I think they're using the Steam Castle as an analog for the nuclear bomb. Back in the 1930s, everybody thought it was impossible to develop such a weapon, but once it was known in 1945, every nation wanted one. Not because they want to use it, but because everybody could potentially use it on them.
I should have thought it was enough to make the Russians stop and think.
But it's not fair. With Trident, we could obliterate the whole of Eastern Europe.
They want to obliterate the whole of Eastern Europe.
But it's a deterrent.
It's a bluff. I probably wouldn't use it.
Yes, but they don't know that you probably wouldn't.
They probably do.
Yes, they probably know that you probably wouldn't, but they can't certainly know.
They probably certainly know that I probably wouldn't.
Yes, but even though they probably certainly know that you probably wouldn't, they don't certainly know that although you probably wouldn't, there's no probability that you certainly would.
This is a very apt description of the arms race during the Cold War. Nobody wanted nuclear weapons, but they were, ironically, necessary to keep the peace. The fear of mutually assured destruction, or MAD as it was called back then, was just too strong. This is why Werner von Braun was so important to the Americans. They needed to develop ways to deliver their nuclear payloads without fail, in order for the deterrent to work. So developing rockets was not just a matter of prestige, it was a matter of survival. I'll restate I am not sure this is what they were going for in this scene, but there are several scenes that hint Edward might want to inspire a similar effect by provoking nations to science up their military arsenals.
Into war and chaos.
And that very chaos will transform us. The heart adapts to reality.
But the heart comes first, Eddie.
Which would be beneficial to scientific progress, yes, but to what end? Unlock humanity's true power? What does it even mean? Back at the plot, Lloyd couldn't talk Edward to stop his plan. So, Lloyd shoots him. In his mind, he created this monster after all, so he should be the one to end it. Beyond that, Lloyd has no more purpose in his life, and he tells his grandson, did I mention Ray was on board? Anyway, Lloyd tells his grandson to take Scarlet. Did I mention Scarlet was there as well? Damn, it's almost like these two don't matter to the plot at all. But what about the steam castle? Well, Lloyd intends to go down with the ship, but...
Hey, I planned the route myself. We're over the Thames.
No, we're not at the river. He changed route.
Hey, where are we?
Whoops. And yeah, we just got teased into a false ending. And it's really frustrating to me, because the sinking of the steam castle really drags on and on. All of it is beautifully animated, don't get me wrong, but it's hard to get immersed in the action if it involves characters we don't really care about. Now, while London turns into the setting of Frostpunk, Lloyd and Ray concoct a plan, and both head to different parts of the ship in order to make a change course. Ray fights another boss battle, and then with help of Scarlet, yes, she's useful to the plot again, changes the direction of the castle. But not before Edward shows up again. Yes, Lloyd did shoot him, but you know. Edward, however, has already fulfilled his mission, which was launching the steam castle, so he has no qualms with ending it as well. He even reveals something that Lloyd had been working on. Ah yes, isn't that nice? And then they walk the castle to the Thames. Great. Now all that is left is to abandon ship. But Ray's flying machine is out of juice, so I guess you could say his ball ran out of steam. Thank you, I'll be here all night. Anyway, his father calls his son for one last time. It turns out that Edward has an escape system in his throne, but now it's Ray's. It contains a jetpack and a matching costume for a fully grown man that somehow suits a 13-year-old boy. So Ray changes while everything collapses around him, and then we enter the final scene where Ray and Scarlet cheer through the sky while the steam castle sinks into the Thames.
Oh, they're out there.
The
I'm sure they're
end. Well, that was Steamboy. For once a production that is both steampunk in story and design. Usually it's just the latter. All the action has been meticulously animated. The movements of every cogwheel, lever and cable looks impressive, but it goes on for far too long. Action scenes follow each other up in elaborate bursts, even though there's no real need for them. Scenes basically go like this. Exposition, in which the characters explain the plot or have a philosophical discussion, followed up by an action scene, rinse and repeat. And the number of action scenes is just excessive. You may get drawn into one scene, but you'll soon forget it because there's just too many of a good thing and all that. But the main problem is the lack of character development. I mentioned how the side character of David got reduced to a one-dimensional villain, so Otomo could make a point how cynicism and greed contribute to science. Like Edward stated, for companies like the O'Haras, science is just a product. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as they can sell it. On the opposite side we have Edward and Lloyd. They believe science will improve mankind. But among those two, their methods of realizing progress differ. Edward is willing to cooperate with companies like the O'Hara Foundation, and nationalists like Stevenson, who sees progress as a necessity for survival of their own nation. All these characters are reduced to their part within the thematic structure. And that's all the development these characters get. They're all reduced to their moral and philosophical positions, and Ray serves as a kind of a vehicle for the viewer to learn more about these positions from the various characters. Now there's nothing wrong with that. Mad Max is just such a character, but where Max is part of the world that the audience beholds, Ray seems to look inside the thematic structure from the outside. I was thinking of calling Ray a Gary Stu at some point, because of him being as noble as he is, and slipping inside of the role of Steamboy as if it's a simple change of uniform. But one of the aspects of the Gary Stu stereotype, he drives the entire plot of a story through his agency, because he is just that awesome. But Ray's character lacks any real agency in this film. Now this can work in a series, then the writers can afford setting the protagonist of the story aside, so they can highlight the development of two minor characters. But this movie is supposed to be about Steamboy. It's kinda like making a film on Superman's origin story that focuses on Lex Luthor dealing with the hardships of baldness, only to have Clark Kent embrace his Superman persona off screen and defeat the bad guy in the end, because they needed to end the film somehow. From that perspective, the title of the movie seems very deceptive, because it's not about Steamboy at all. But there is so much potential here. Let's talk about the end credits for a moment, because here we see a number of stills that hint at the future adventures of Ray as Steamboy. We even see a second Steamboy appear in one picture, and it's almost like a teaser trailer for 2 whole new movies. Here we can clearly see all the themes, which Otomo's love so much. Apparently Lloyd survived the steam castle incident, but dies of old age. On his deathbed, he hands Ray an electric lamp. Not sure what's so special about it, because Ray already had an electric lamp in his study, but maybe it's a battery inside it which makes it so special. The point is that it is a peaceful invention. However, in a few stills later, we see just such a lamp being used in an alternative version of World War I, with paratroopers. So yeah, no matter what you invent, humanity will find a military purpose for it. You also see a picture of Scarlet with her airplane, Ray fighting a mechanical dragon in Paris. I mean, this is all great stuff, and proof that Otomo knows how to tell a visual story, but is somewhat a poor director. Thank you for joining us these last 3 videos on Steamboy, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed this change in style. Let me know if you want me to make more of these types of videos. Not sure what the next video on Steampunkish will be about, probably another video game, and if you have any suggestions for movies or other type of content, please let me know. The next video will be another episode of the Steampunk Beginner's Guide, with a surprise guest, of whom I finally have the footage. That's why it took so long, and I hope to have another special guest during a Steampunk Beginner's Guide episode as well. In between I might post some footage of these events I've been to these last 2 weeks. That's why this episode took so long. Please tell me your thoughts on Steamboy down in the comments, and if you want to have a discussion with me, please join us on Discord. Also, I intend to push my Patreon more often, because I want to do some severe upgrades on my recording equipment. So if there is any merchandise you want of this channel, please let me know, and I'll consider it. Now, as always, keep making things your way, and I hope to see you all next time.